I'm Branko Radulovacki, and most folks know me as Dr. Rad. I'm a medical doctor, a physician in private practice in Atlanta, and I'm a psychiatrist. And usually when I tell folks in a public setting that I'm a psychiatrist, a lot of them take a kind of a step back a bit because they think, and I wasn't sure why that was, but then people told me later. They said, "Oh, well, you must be analyzing me." Wow. You know, I'm in a social setting. So I want to just reassure all of you, I'm not here to analyze anyone here. But I do feel called, and this is why I'm running for the United States Senate, I do feel called to address the dysfunction that's been going on up in Washington. We do need a change. We need a positive change. Now, I started my public service several years ago, working around the mental health reforms to our state psychiatric hospital system. About 6 or 7 years ago, there was an investigative series done by the AJC, and they uncovered that over 100 people died under suspicious circumstances in our state psychiatric hospitals here in Georgia. Well, I galvanized a group of mental health advocates, and collectively, we were able to get the state to put in over $50 million to help improve conditions in those hospitals and to increase community resources so that those individuals, the most vulnerable in our society, would have the appropriate care, would not have to go into the hospital. Now that was a phenomenal outcome, and for me, that effort was like a second job, a non-paying second job. I felt called to that, and I felt it was an important opportunity to give back to the community. Now, even before going into medicine, I worked on Wall Street as a banker, and then I earned my MBA from the University of Chicago. So I really believe that my background in healthcare and in finance and working as a small business owner, as a solo practitioner, as well as my mental health advocacy work have really equipped me to be a very strong voice for all of Georgia up in Washington and work in the true spirit of bipartisanship in an effort to end the gridlock that's been plaguing our nation for the past few years. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the issues that are close to my heart. Number one is health care. As a medical doctor, a physician, I recognize that health care is really a right. It's not a privilege. We need to make it affordable and accessible to as many Georgians and Americans as we can. Now, that's why I support Medicaid expansion here in Georgia. And last fall, I created a video, a DVD, that called out Governor Deal and Insurance Commissioner Hudgens for their obstructionism in the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. I also went around the state and organized Affordable Care Act town hall meetings so I could educate Georgians about this new law and how they can make the best decision for themselves and their family with respect to their health care. I do believe that health care is the -- issue in 2014 on the national scale and also here in Georgia. Now, I was earlier this morning, or earlier today, I was in Atlanta, and I participated in a United States Senate candidate forum with the National Federation of Independent Business Owners. Now, this is a small business organization, but it's a very conservative group. There were 5 Republican Senate candidates there. There were 2 Democratic candidates who were invited, Michelle Nunn and me. I was the only candidate representing the Democratic Party there today. But the reason why I'm saying this is that of all the candidates there, how many do you think supported the Affordable Care Act? One. That's right, one. So what did the 5 Senate Republican candidates say about it? To a person, they want to repeal it, they want to defund it, they want to stomp all over it. I mean, they just couldn't be more vocal in their opposition, even now, that it's legislation. And over 3 million people have insurance through the marketplace. They still want to go back. And this is what I say to you all. We are not about to go back in time. We cannot make a U-turn. We cannot take apart this legislation. We cannot throw us back into the chaos that we were in last year in 2014 when folks shut down the government. We cannot simply go backwards. We have to make the fixes. It's not perfect, that's okay. Social Security isn't perfect. Medicare isn't perfect. We're constantly making changes to those programs. That doesn't mean we need to get rid of them. We just need to make them better. And we are going to find out how to make the Affordable Care Act better, and we need to make those fixes, but we need to move forward. And that's what I believe. I believe our country is best when we are problem solving and looking forward, not looking backward. So that's a very strong issue that I feel strongly about. Another one is immigration reform. And I'm a naturalized citizen in the United States. I was born in the former Yugoslavia, now Serbia. And at the age of 7, my family and I moved to the United States. Actually, before that, we moved to Africa. I lived in Africa for 3 years between the ages of 4 and 7. My father is a medical researcher, so his research took us to Khartoum, Sudan, and we lived there for a few years and then came to the United States at the age of 7. So I believe in the American dream. In fact, I've lived the American dream. And as a young child, as a young boy coming to the United States, we didn't have any family here. We had no social supports, focused on public education, hard work, the encouragement of my family. And here I am, successful practice, and now looking to give back to our community and serve at the highest level in the United States government and serve the folks in Georgia. But I believe that folks who are willing to come to this country, whether they're folks with high skills or whether they're folks with low skills, we need all folks, regardless of their skill level, to come to this country because we have all kinds of jobs and we have all kinds of opportunities, and we need to make sure that those individuals who are willing to come here and sacrifice, and a lot of the folks who are here, immigrant workers, are starting at the lowest levels, but they're investing. They're investing in the future of their families and the future generations. And I believe that folks are willing to work hard, be productive, pay their taxes, and do what the other citizens do. I think we ought to offer them an opportunity for citizenship. I think that's fair. I think that is the American way. That's how we strengthen our country. So I support immigration reform. And as we know, there was some bipartisan legislation that was passed out of the United States Senate, but now is stuck in the House of Representatives. And I'll tell you, I was at a Georgia Municipal Association debate, another debate where there were 6 Senate Republican candidates, and to a person, they would not agree to pass immigration reform. They would not. And I think to myself, well, you know, that's another form of this dysfunction in Washington and all this and this obstructionism. The United States Chamber of Commerce, this is a very conservative group. The president of the United States Chamber, even he said that 2014 should be the year that immigration reform gets passed. If the Senate passes bipartisan immigration reform legislation, why can't the House? I think we have 3 Republican Senate candidates who are all in the House, and they're all voting. They're all going to say, no, we don't want to pass immigration reform. That's wrong. That's part of the dysfunction in Washington. And I would support that. I'll do everything I can to make sure we would pass that immigration reform this year. Actually, it will be next year because they'll take office in 2015. So the third issue that's close to my heart is education. And education, as we all believe, is a public good. And it is still the way up the economic ladder in this country and social mobility through education. But I believe that starts at the earliest stages with investment in pre-K, now all the way up through for folks who want to attend college or graduate school. I think we need to make those opportunities available to them. We need to make those kinds of educational opportunities more affordable and accessible. Right now, large financial institutions can borrow from the United States government interest rates lower than most families can get loans for financing their education. That's not right. Why should large financial institutions be able to borrow more cheaply than American families who are trying to better themselves, better their children, and look for a better way of life and achieve their potential and reach the American dream? I think that's wrong. I would do everything in my power to make sure that American families would be able to borrow at lower costs, at lower interest rates, in order to be able to put their children and themselves and obtain the education that they need in order to keep moving forward in their life, in their vocational lives, in their professional lives. So let me just talk about a couple other things. One is we talk about this, the president spoke in his State of the Union address. He talked about income inequality. He focused on that as a key issue. Now, and I believe he may have said that here in America, we understand that there's going to be differences in income based on the kind of work a person does, based on the amount of education they have, and we understand that, and we're okay with that. What we're not okay with is this growing disparity, this growing income inequality. That's not right. Over the past 3 years, the 90% of the income gains have gone to whom? The 1%. 90% of the income gains have gone to the 1%. What about everybody else? Where does everyone else fit in? That's that growing income inequality. That's not right. We have to understand that better, but we also have to address it. So I believe there are a couple of ways that we can address it right here and now. And one is with extending unemployment benefits. I believe that those individuals who have been chronically unemployed, who are looking for work, who want to work, I believe we ought to be able to support them and their families. And why is that? Is it because they're, as some of the Senate Republican candidates say, well, it's just, they just need to work harder. They just need to be more motivated. Well, I say to you that the data says otherwise. The data says that for every 3 applicants right now looking for work, there's only 1 job. It doesn't matter how hard you work, if the job isn't there, you're not going to find it. So, I just think we have to look at things from a realistic standpoint. And these individuals, they've been looking for a long time. And this has been the worst recession, it's called the Great Recession, in several generations. So we have to look at things in context. If this is one of the worst recessions that our country's ever experienced, and now these folks are saying, well, that's still too bad, and they just need to work harder. I don't think that's realistic. I think we need to make sure that we give our families and those who are working to support themselves and their families an opportunity. Hang in there. Jobs are coming. It's a slow recovery, but they are coming. We need to support them. So I do support extending unemployment benefits. I also support increasing the minimum wage. That was another issue at today's forum that came up. How many of you think that in terms of the number of candidates who supported increasing the minimum wage, that was a question at the forum. All the candidates, all 6 of us, were supposed to answer. Do you support the minimum wage? How many candidates do you think supported the minimum wage in that forum today? That's right. Only one candidate supported increasing the minimum wage, and that was me. And what I told the audience, and I was the last one to speak on this question, every single candidate every single Republican candidate said, no. And in fact, the moderator of the panel said, before the question was even, before he even allowed the candidates to answer the question, he said, now, you all don't need to take a lot of time with this question. That's what he told all of us. You don't need to take it, because we know what the answer is. As I said, it's a very conservative business group. So, and true to form, they all said no. And I said yes. And I told them why. I said that, for one thing, small business owners, like myself, understand that investing in their employees is critical. Paying them a good wage, providing them with good benefits, providing them with, and in my case, I provide my staff with bonuses. Because I know that there's certain days I'm just not on my game. I'm just not right. But my staff, she's right there. She helps me get right. And usually in a pleasant way. But she's critical to the success of my practice. I can't do everything in my practice, and she's a vital component of making my practice profitable and successful and keeping things going. So it's important to invest in our employees. That's one of the reasons why. Now the other reason, from the standpoint of a small business owner, most of the folks at in this group, on their group's website, it says that one of their biggest concerns is the fact that they've got high levels of inventory right now. And so the question is, how do you get rid of that inventory? Well, several of the two of the other candidates who spoke today said, well, we need to put money in the pockets of consumers. That's what we need to do. And they believe that, and yet they're still voting no for minimum wage increase. And I said to them, I agree with you. I agree with you. We do need to put money in the pockets of consumers. But you know what? Consumers aren't some group out there, some group that sort of exists onto themselves. Consumers are who? They're workers. And they work in your companies. So yes, I agree. Let's put money in the workers' pockets, because you know what they're going to do with it? They're going to spend it. And they're going to spend it on your products. And that's going to stimulate that demand. It's going to pull the inventories down. And what else is it going to do? That's going to create job creation. That's a stimulus for job creation. So they were on one hand saying, yes, we need to put money in consumers' pockets, but they didn't make the connection that consumers are workers. They're their employees, and they need to be supported. And that's what I said to them. Now, I'll tell you, after I said that, again, being the only one who did support the minimum wage, I did hear a little hissing in the background. But you know what? We as Democrats have to stand up for what we believe and for what is right. It doesn't matter what crowd it is. And I'll tell you, the reason why I went to this forum, first of all, I was invited, and that's good. And as the next United States Senator, we serve everybody in Georgia. They don't have to have the same ideas. We don't have to agree all the time, but we have to listen to one another. That's at a minimum. We're Georgians. We're in this together. So I felt it was an obligation to be there at that candidate forum, listen to them, and then share with them truthfully and honestly and candidly what I believe. There's no shame in that. And in fact, Democrats, I think part of the reason where we are in the state with respect to our elected officials and the fact that we don't have any state constitutional officers, we need to stand up for what we believe. And because what we're believing in is right and it helps people. It addresses the needs of Georgians. And we need to do it with pride and we need to do it with integrity. And that's what I did today. And I also was invited last fall to a Tea Party, a Senate candidate event. And you know what? I was the only Democratic Senate candidate who showed up at that event. And you know what? That's okay, because you know what? I talked to them. And they wanted to know, well, what is this, all this living wage? What does that mean? Well, I explained it to them. I explained to them that right now, an individual who is supporting a family and is working full-time on minimum wage cannot support that family. That's not right. If you want to work and you have a full-time job and you can work full-time, you should be able to support your family on that wage. And right now, people can't do it. And so, that person listened. And we were able to talk about it in a constructive way. Now, I don't know if I changed her mind or not, but it was an opportunity to share our message, meet people where they are, and work with them. So I'm glad I went and, again, represented the Democratic Party. We have to engage folks. We can't afford not to, because I think ultimately we have a strong message. I believe we have a stronger message than the other side does. So we need to present that and present it in a very convincing manner. So those are the couple of issues that I just want to share with you. As I've been campaigning across the state, I've been saying that, that Georgia needs a new senator, but Washington really needs a psychiatrist. So I'm unique. I believe on that account, I'm uniquely qualified. So I ask for your support. I ask for your vote on May 20th. Let me open it now for some questions, and I'll be glad to answer.
Where can I buy that bumper sticker you just gave me?
As soon as we get it out, we'll send it to you. As soon as we get it out. Any questions?
Good T-shirt for sure. Was there any one thing that motivated you to seek this office?
Well, I don't think, really, I guess it was that I realized that there was this crisis in leadership up in Washington, that our elected leaders really weren't fulfilling their responsibilities. They were going up there, but they weren't getting the job done. They weren't addressing the needs of the people. There seemed to be a disconnect between what was going on in Washington and what was going on here in Georgia, that they just weren't listening. And so from my standpoint, as a psychiatrist, that's my profession. That's what I'm trained to do. I'm a trained listener. And when folks come to my office, I treat Tea Partiers and conservatives and liberals and libertarians and progressives and Democrats, Republicans. It really just doesn't matter. Because when folks come into the office, we focus on the problem. We focus on the problem, and when we do that, common sense solutions come out to even the most complex problems. And so that's the kind of approach that I plan to take and perspective up to Washington and work on behalf of the people of Georgia, listening to them, bringing their concerns and advocating for them, but also working with those individuals who are up there already. And I think when we focus on those problems, I think we can come up with solutions. That's what I'm doing. I'm putting my heart and soul into this campaign because I believe so much that we need change and that it is the time for change. And the folks in Georgia really are ready for it. And I believe the Democratic Party, that we have the strength and we have the numbers that we can do this. And that's why I'm coming here. I'm going, I was in Baldwin County a week ago and just traveling the state with this message and really trying to engage our base and really say that, we have this opportunity. We need to rise up, stand up for what we believe because we can make a difference. And that difference I found to be borne out in the work that I did in my mental health advocacy around the reforms to the state psychiatric hospital system. And I'll tell you the story about it. When I first started contacting these advocates and saying, hey, we need to do something about the 100 people are dead, the state, our state leaders are not rising to the occasion, we need to get going. And several of them said to me, Dr. Rad, you're right, this is important, but what can we do? The state's kind of got this issue. And in fact, one of them said to me, she said, Dr. Rad, I agree with your stand on this, but you would have more success in this effort if you went down to the governor's mansion, tied yourself to the gates of the mansion naked, and maybe then people would pay more attention to you. That's how despondent, that's how hopeless people were feeling about it. And yet, the heart in the right place, focusing on serving others, and saying, you know what, we need a change. Regardless of what you say, even if you're feeling hopeless, I'm feeling encouraged. I feel like we need to do something. And so I met with one person, met with another person, kept meeting with folks until we did get a group of advocates together, and we rekindled that enthusiasm to address the needs of the most vulnerable, those with a severe mental illness. And ultimately, we got a miraculous result. State agreed to put in over $50 million. It was, you know, the United States Justice, we got the U.S. Justice Department involved, and they sued the state of Georgia, so the state ultimately settled with the Justice Department, but it was for $50 million. And no one, when I started talking to folks, would have believed that that would have been possible when we first started those conversations. In fact, they told me, right, go to the governor's mansion, you know, string yourself up. That was doom and gloom talking. That wasn't what motivated me. I felt we had to do something. I had that passion, had that purpose, and ultimately something wonderful happened. So I do believe that one person can make a difference, can address a system that people believe is broken, feel there's no opportunity for change, and make that, and get that going. Be that domino that starts that process, that catalyst that starts that change. And I believe this can happen right now here in Georgia in the Senate race, and to address the dysfunction that's happening in Washington. Yes, sir.
Yes, with your medical background, how do you plan to attack mental illness and addiction other than prison?
Well, that's a great question. That's a great question. And I think there's a start here in Georgia with these mental health courts that are starting to pop up, you know, in the state. I think that's the right way to go. You know, since we've deinstitutionalized those with mental illness in our country and in the state of Georgia, the prisons have become the de facto institutions where a lot of these individuals go. That's not right. They're not getting the care there. We are spending a lot of taxpayers' dollars, but in the inappropriate place. So I do think we can have these mental health courts where they can, you know, identify these individuals who shouldn't be in prison, shouldn't be in jail. They need treatment. And then we need to, you know, move them in that direction. So I would support more of those kinds of efforts and those kind of collaborative efforts between departments. Let me mention one other thing, you know, on a separate topic, but along the theme of not going backwards. There's one other area that I think is so critical to what's happening at the national level, and especially has significant importance here in Georgia. And I'm talking about voters' rights. That's another effort with their individuals at the federal level and here in Georgia who are looking to take us back in time. Take away folks' rights. We're finding out there are decreased numbers of polling places. We're finding out that early voter periods are being reduced. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that folks are going to, is the implication that people are going to, this is going to help more people vote? No, it's not. It means fewer people are going to get a chance to vote. And we're talking about voter suppression, and that's wrong. Now, I very strongly support bipartisan legislation that is making its way in Congress that would reinstate pre-clearance on a national level. We need to take back what the Supreme Court took away. I don't think that's right. And again, this is an effort by some to bring us back in time, and we cannot go back. There's been too much effort, there's been too much blood, too much sweat and tears put into obtaining these rights. This is at the heart of our American system of democracy, which is that one person, one vote. We need to ensure that for future generations, and we need to have a representative who's strongly going to support that kind of pre-clearance legislation to reinstate it, and that's what I'll do as your next United States Senator. There are just too many of our young people, especially in the African American community, who are now being moved through this school to prison pipeline with these charges, you know, this marijuana possession. And they are being, if you want to say, you know, sort of targeted. It's an unjust law when you have one demographic group that's being highlighted, you know, in terms of the consequences of a particular law. So we need sentence reform. We need to decriminalize that. And that, I think, will help end that, you know, contribute to diminishing that prison pipeline for many of our young people. So I do think that's an important issue that I would support strongly at the federal level too. And you know, let me talk about one other thing that I think is important. We talked about the income inequality. We talked about you know, the importance of how do we level that playing field. And of course, we level that playing field by in part stimulating job creation. And so how do we do that? You know, how do we increase jobs in this economy? Well, I think we do it in a couple of ways. One is through public investment, through our infrastructure. Right now there are decades worth of jobs, of projects that we can invest in to improve our roads, our highways, our bridges, to increase our competitiveness here in the United States and also globally. And I think that would be a wonderful thing. That would create a lot of jobs. Now, another area that I would say that we can do that is through some tax reform. Now, people are saying, oh, the corporations are always looking for tax breaks. Well, I say, last year, if you look at who was making all the money, where's all the profits going? You just look at the who's who of the Fortune 500, you see what kind of double-digit profits they were making. There are billions of dollars that these corporations have. Now, what's happening with that money? Should we be continuing to give them some more tax credits and tax subsidies when they're already making billions and billions and billions of dollars? I don't think so. I think what we need to do, because that money, do you know where that money is right now? It's sitting in bank accounts. They're sitting on it. They're not investing it. Those corporations are not investing it. And why are they not investing it? Because of the dysfunction in Washington. They can't trust the Washington legislators with legislating. They don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to shut down the government? Where is this going to go? So they're holding on to their money. I think if we send legislators up there who are common sense problem solvers, who are really looking to work in a bipartisan effort, I think that's going to increase the confidence of those corporations that they're going to start investing those profits. We don't need to give them more subsidies. We don't need to give them more tax breaks. In fact, we've got to reform some of those to make sure they're paying their fair share, those large corporations. But let's bring some sanity into the legislating process, into the governing process, and that will increase their confidence in these corporations. They can put those profits to work, investing in their corporations, creating jobs, good-paying jobs for Americans. So that would be my prescription as far as job creation goes.
Keep hollering no new taxes, but one thing they totally forget is being a citizen of this country gave them the opportunity to make those bills.
Yeah, right.
They couldn't do that anyway.
That's right. That's right. And that's part of the. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Period. Now, through their wealth, these large corporations and the wealthiest individuals have been able to rig the system through their high-paid lobbyists up in Washington. They've created an unfair situation. It's kind of a rigged system now. It isn't fair. It isn't. We don't have a tax policy that's fair because of what's been going on in Washington. So that's absolutely right. So we do need to figure out a way to level the playing field. And I'll tell you one other way that's that it's a sort of shell game that the Republicans don't openly acknowledge, and that is that the largest corporations like Walmart, they're the ones who are employing so many individuals at the minimum wage. Well, those individuals, as I said earlier, as we all know, they can't afford to support their families. So what happens? There's a backdoor subsidy. There's a backdoor subsidy that these large corporations are getting from the government because it's now the government who has to jump in with food stamps and other programs to help support those families because those corporations are taking advantage with these low wages. So again, that's an unfair system. So the rest of us are paying that subsidy for those large corporations because through the taxes that we pay to support those families. They need support. Those families need support. So when the Republicans say, oh, we need limited government, we need less government, well, hang on for a second. We need that government to help support those individuals because those large corporations certainly aren't doing it. So, yeah, fairness and opportunity.
One other thing. Every representative in Congress and the Senate should have a preacher on their staff. Every time an objection comes up, bring out the Bible and show what Christ Now, the Republicans think they're the ones closest to God, but I can tell you right now, I can show a bunch of them how far they are from the truth. I had a friend, a Republican friend of mine, one day asked me why I was such a liberal. And I said, I'll tell you directly. The Christ that I worship is the ultimate liberal. And anything conservative is a contradiction of his will. Period.
Well, I think that I agree with what you're saying. I mean, from that standpoint of, I think we really need public servants who are looking to serve others in that spirit,
Yeah.
and really looking for the welfare of others, not serving self, serving others. And I think, that's what my call is, and that's where my faith is calling me to do in this race.
But our churches alone can't do it.
No.
We've got to have the help of government in the process.
That's right. Yeah, that is part of the role of government, absolutely.
Quit
And-
calling these people conservatives. They are not conservatives in the sense of the word.
No,
They're
they're not.
regressives.
They're what?
Regressives. They
Regressives.
want to regress. They want to make it back.
Well,
Conservatives, in the true sense of the word, they are.
let me say this too. I want to touch on, because we talked about faith. You mentioned the church, and I'm a person of deep faith. I'm a person of deep faith. I'm a Christian, and yet I do believe in the separation of church and state. I believe there's a role for the church, and I believe there's a role of the government. And I believe as part of that, I don't believe the government should be in the role of discriminating against anyone, any group. The government needs to serve all. And so we're talking about issues like, marriage equality. That is something that I support. For that reason, the government should not be in the business of discriminating. Regardless of what you may believe one thing, and your church may believe one thing, and if you're in a synagogue may believe another thing. And that's all okay, and that's all fine. But when it comes to the government, we cannot be discriminating against any group. And I also think, along those lines, that the government ought to stay out of our personal lives, and especially when it comes to women and their reproductive health and their choice and those decisions. They need to be free to do that. And when I was at this Georgia Municipal Association Senate debate, and so someone brought up to the Republican candidate, well, what do you think? Do you think there is a war? Do you think the Republicans are waging war on women? All of them said, oh, that's just political. Well, the truth is, what else would you call it? When there's one side that's trying to take away a woman's right to make a choice over her health, what else would you call that? I would call that a war. I would call it. They're trying to take away that right. That's a basic right that that women have that we need to continue to protect. Let me one thing that I want to just touch on, and that is this conversation over budget deficits that we've had over the past few years. At the federal level, folks have been talking about cutting, reducing the deficit. Well, I think that dialogue, if you really drill down at it, that dialogue has been about what? It's not, when they talk about cutting, what are the Republicans really talking about cutting? Well, Social Security and Medicare. These insurance programs have been established for for some of them for our elderly and some are most vulnerable. And what? I think the Democrats have, in that spirit of we want to get along, we so much want to work together, that we were willing to compromise on that. And I think, especially as we talked about, as we've come out of this economy, who's really benefiting? The large corporations, the most wealthy individuals. Are we really going to engage in this conversation? Are we really going to engage in this conversation again about how much we're going to cut Social Security and Medicare? I don't support that. I don't support that. I'm a strong supporter of keeping Medicare and Social Security intact as they are. Because you know what? Right now, 10% of those receiving Social Security are living under the poverty level, in poverty. Now, if we were to get rid of Social Security, 40% of those individuals would be living in poverty. These, again, it just, I just shake my head.
It's not an entitlement.
That's right. It's an insurance program that folks have put into it. They paid into it.
Correct.
Absolutely. So I think, again, it's sort of this sense of fairness, the sense of opportunity, leveling the playing field. This is an area where we have to look at really who are we asking to pay for these, That's right. And who ought to be paying more of their fair share? So we need an advocate up in Washington who's willing to say that, willing to stand up for those issues, and not compromise on those things. Let's compromise on where we can find some common ground, but let's really be sure what we're doing. And let's protect those who are most needy, who are vulnerable, and who've earned these insurance programs.
I would like to tell the voters of Washington County that you are a real Democrat and that President Obama needs your help. And maybe they'll get out and vote for you.
Yeah.
Well, thank
We
you.
need some slogans.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Good night. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I will. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
All right, doctor.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Yeah, he got it.